This will be our review for the final exam, where we have a mixture of items from that little bit of Chapter 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So I only made 22 questions. If you want to make a practice test, hopefully you know how to do it. Check with me if not. And here we're looking for a strategy to get to the answers. So in this first one, we're asked, let's get red here, to graph this equation. Now review, it's in the form of y equals mx plus b, slope-intercept. So what is in the m position is the slope. In the b position is your y-intercept. So they're asking us that. What is the slope here? Well, the slope is -2. Now, my mouse kind of froze there for a moment. And what is the y-intercept? Well, it's what is in b. Now, the official way to write it, remember, is 0, comma, b value. And the b value here is 1. Okay. Now, you could develop a little t-chart, but we did say there is a shorthand method for graphing something like this. You first graph the point, the y-intercept, which is a +1. So you would put a dot there. Click on it. Then your slope, as we said, was a -2. Hopefully I did put the negative up there. So that's a -2 over 1. So we said if it's negative, from your y-intercept, you would go over. Remember, this is the x and this is the y value. This is rise and this is run. We would go over the run to the left because it's negative and then up 2. Over to the left, up 2. I'm just getting some more points so that when I put my line in, you get a more accurate line here. Something like so. And of course, once you put this point in and this point in, then the line forms on yours. Now, in this example, they're asking us to do the FOIL. So again, if you use lines, that's not a problem. Like this, the first, that's going to be x squared. The outers, that's going to be 6x. Now I'm doing it this way so I can put the answer in here. Inners, 1x, and then last, +6. Now we're going to add our two, the outer and the inner terms, and this gives us +7x. Now you could have written it out all horizontally, but generally speaking, your inners and outers are like terms, so you have to do something with it. So hopefully by this time you have a way to deal with it. Now, for this one is the Pythagorean theorem right here. A squared, if you square this side and square this side, add it together, it's equal to the square of side C. And if you want to solve for A, you transpose the b squared over, it makes it a negative on this side, and then take the square root of A is A and the square root of the other side. So we're just going to fill this in now. A will equal the square root of C is 19 squared minus 8 squared and you're going to put that in your calculator and then take the square root of it. That's what A will be. And that's what I will do right now. So when I did that, I got the square root of 297, took that, and I got this. And it says to round to 3 decimal places. So I go to the 4th decimal place and see that it's a 6. So I drop the 6 and make this last 3 here a 4. So our final answer then would be 17.234. Now if you did all this work and you didn't round it properly, again you get partial credit. That's why you want to be sure to include all your work on your blue sheet. Now as we go on to number 4, they're asking us to find the equation of the line and then enter it in slope-intercept form, which is this one right here. So we're looking at the graph, and what do we know just by looking at the graph? Well, our y-intercept is right here, and that's our b value. So I can put that into this formula already. That's going to be where it crosses the y-axis. Now, what is our slope? Well, notice it crosses here, right on the grid lines. If I make my little triangle, I go 1, 2, 3, 4, up 1. So this is a negative direction, a positive direction. So my slope is a negative 1/4. Remember, if we had to graph this, this is how we would do it. We'd put a dot on our y-intercept. The slope is a negative 1/4, so we would go from our y-intercept over 4 places, and then up 1, put our second point there, and that's the equation of this line. Now, for the first part of question 5, we're asked to find this formula that involves interest rate. Well, the formula is this one here. We had one like this before. I equals PRT. After 4 years, Brian's account earns this much interest. If the interest rate is this much, how much did Brian initially invest? So what don't we know about our value here? Well, we know the interest, we know the time, and we know the rate. What we don't know is the principal. So they're asking us to find the principal. But before we do that, they want us to solve for the letter P. So the way we do that, and I'll change colors here, is we have to divide out, since this is a product, we can factor out common factors, RT from this side, RT from this side. So these then cancel out, and our interest is this. Now a little later they're going to ask us to solve, and what would the answer be? So let's do that. So our interest we know is 1,200. That's our I. We know the rate is 0.06. And we know the time for T is 4. So we put that into our calculator. Remember, put a times here. You might put this after you hit the division. You want to try this on your calculator to see if you're going to get the right answer. And that would be $5,000. As we go on to question 6 now, we have this quadratic equation, and it's in standard form. there's just no C term here. Let's go back to red. So they want us to factor it. Well, one of the things I would do first is I would get rid of the negative 5 by dividing everything by a negative 5. So here the 5's cancel out and I get x squared. This cancels to a positive 4x equals 0. So it's a lot easier. Could have done it the other way. The answers would have come out the same, but now I'm going to factor out the x, and I get x plus 4 equals 0. Then we are using that factor property that a times b equals 0. In order for this to be true, either the a part or the b part needs to be 0. So then we just equate that. X equals 0, or x plus 4 equals 0. So there's one of our answers already. And then if we just transpose the 4, we get x equals a negative 4. So our two answers here are x equals 0 and x equals a negative 4. Now the textbook wants you, to put it in steps, so we did it all on one slide, but there's where you would put the answers. Okay. Oh, let's see, we're doing number 7 now, where we're asked to substitute these values into this expression and then simplify your answer. So what I've done is I've taken the x here, all right, we had a little bell ringer there. So the x is a 3, the y, I've put it in parentheses, is a negative 4, and I'm showing it as an addition. So when you combine these two, you end up with a negative 1 that you're going to square. And then it's 6 times the z value, which is 4, which is 24. So here's the key. Negative 1 times negative 1 is 1. This becomes a 1 here. 1 plus 24 is 25. And again, if you have the work, and for some reason you didn't get this part right and had a different answer, I can possibly give you credit for putting in the correct substitution, and if you got this part right, again, it's important to show your work as you do your test so I can give partial credit. Now as we go on to number 8, here we see an equation that's in slope-intercept form. So this is the slope, and then this is the y-intercept. Now, they want you to find 2 points that you would place here, and a good way to do it would be to make a little t-chart. Now, what is the coordinate of the y-intercept, the b? Well, we say when it was in this form, 0, b, well, our b is 4. So one of the points would be 0 and then 4. That gives you 1 point, which is right there. Now, what would be another point? And you notice the slope here is 8/3. Oh, so if we could get rid of that 3, well, let's make x a 3. So this would be like a 3 here for the x. These would cancel out, and I would get 8 then, plus 4 is 12. And there are my 2 points. Now, are there others? Absolutely. Remember, there's an infinite number of points along this line, but MATLAB works nicely, so when you put a set of ordered pairs in, the graph forms. It'll put this other point, even though this 12 is not on the graph here. So this would be 3. Let's see here. 1, 2, 3. And it would take you all the way up here, 10, 11, 12, probably up there somewhere. And then the line would look like this when you finally graph it. So another way would be that you're going over 1, 2, 3, and you're going all the way up to 12 here. Actually, that's a little bit off because I should have started from my y-intercept over 3, all the way up here to 12 units, which might be a little higher than that. But anyway, putting this in, the graph is drawn. For number 9, they're giving us the background, a word problem, and then they give us the formula. So they're saying this tallest building is this high, and then they're saying these trees in California, which are very tall, if you took 8 of them, you would have to still add, you can put them on top of each other, you still have to add 21 to have the height of that tall building in Dubai. So there's the formula. They want you to find what's the height of the tree here, one of them. So we're going to subtract or transpose the 12 to both sides. On this side it becomes negative 21. So this gives us 2696. And we're going to divide then both sides by 8. Because this then makes it an x, and we get 337 feet is the height of the tree here. All right. Consider the following relation. Now here we're talking about function a little bit, and let's just do a quick review. That a relation is any sets of numbers that are somehow connected to each other. Well, an excellent example is the ordered pair. Well, and we said the domain, let me write that a little better here, were the x values, and the range were the y values. And we also said that if the x value was repeated, then it was not a function. So they're going to ask us all about this. So what we're going to do is over here list the 1, -8, -8. So since an x value is listed twice, this is not going to be a function. But in your domain listing here, and I can list that actually here. So this is a 1, a -8, a -7, a 5, and a 0. And for the range now, we have a 7, a 0, an 8, a -1, a -3, and a -4. And we already determined since the x value, -8, is repeated, it is not a function. Now a review for this question. It says, write an equation of a line parallel to the y-axis. So this is the y-axis. This is the x-axis. They want a line parallel. So it's going to be a vertical line that goes through point 1, 0. Now remember, we said that this ordered pair can also be considered this way, A, comma, B. So this is our A value, and this is our B value. So it's going to go through 1, comma, 0, which, if we make some points here, this is 1, and this is 2. And then 1, comma, 0 is right there. Now, what would be the equation of a line parallel to the y-axis? Is it going to be a horizontal line which follows this formula, y equals b, or a vertical line that follows this formula, x equals a? Well, we want a line parallel, so it's going to be vertical, so it's going to be this formula. And what point then from our ordered pair do we use? Well, we use our a value. So the equation would be x equals 1. Now, you could, if you'd like, sketch a line in here. The equation of this line right here is x equals 1. By the way, this vertical line, is this a function? And the answer is no. It doesn't pass that vertical line test. That if you're moving that vertical line over the face of the graph, is it only intersecting in one place? No, it's intersecting in an infinite number of places. So this graph, of the three graphs, remember we said this was positive slope, starting low and going up, this is a function. We also said that's negative slope. That's also a function. And the domain of these are all real numbers. These are just other possible questions you might have. And then the third one was the horizontal line, which is y equals b, and this is point B right there. And here, this passes the vertical line test and is a function, but the domain of it is for x values, all real numbers. But now for y, it would just be that b value. All right, so some other review that we're not going to have 40 or 50 questions on here. We only put 22. Now, for this one, they're asking us to solve for the height here eventually. And they gave us the formula of a trapezoid, but they first want you to solve for the letter H. And these are looking, some of them, familiar, because I think we've done things like this before. So what's the first thing to do when you see a formula like this? You want to solve for the letter H. Well, it's to multiply both sides by 2 here. So the 2's will cancel out, and we now get 2a equals h, and then b plus c. Now we want to isolate the h, so this is actually h times this, so these are factors. So I'll change colors again. We're going to divide out this common factor, b plus c, b plus c, and now we've done it. So we cancel this out, and we have h equals this. So now in this position, we want to substitute what we know here, and then find out what h is. So here we get 2 times our area, 48, which is 96, and then a 4 and an 8 add up to 12. We do the division here, and this is 8. So H equals 8. That's the height, and that's how we did it. Now I see this is running long, but we'll just keep going. You could fast forward it or watch it again even, whatever is needed here. Now what we're going to allow you to do here is, even though they asked us to solve this by substitution, as you look at this, if you just were to draw a line underneath them, notice what happens to your y values. They just cancel out. And we get 11x equals a negative 22. Wow. Now you divide both sides by 11, and we get x equals a negative 2. So it would be consistent, and one of our values is negative 2. Now if x is negative 2, we can then put that x value, let's say here, 4 times negative 2 minus y equals a negative 1. We're just substituting our x value now in this second equation. So this is negative 8 minus y equals a negative 1. We're going to transpose the negative 8 to this side where it becomes a positive 8. And now I end up with negative y equals 7. Negative 1 and an 8 gives me a 7. But I don't want a negative y. So I'm going to divide this side by a negative 1, divide this side by a negative 1, and I get then y equals a negative 7. So those are my solutions. And it is consistent. If you put these into the system, they will solve it. They will make true statements of it. Now, in this example, they're asking us to graph this inequality. Now, when we're graphing an inequality, it's not just a line, but a region that would make it true. And we have to keep in mind, as we look at the inequality symbol, as to what kind of line will make up the boundary. Will it be a solid line or a dashed line? So as we look at this, we see it's only less than. So that means it's going to be a dashed line. But we have to put in some points here so our dashed line can form. And this one looks like a good, sort of standard form. So a x and y intercept t-chart would be a good one. So if x were 0, y, we're going to divide both sides by 3, is 1. And if y here is 0, x is 3. So our points are 0, 1, 3, 0. And then our line would form. And let's form it here. 0, 1 is right there. And then here, this is 3, 0. So it's over 3 up like this here. So this is our dashed line here. Now there's going to be a region A and a region B. Where do we shade? Well, we had said if you solve this for a positive y, and right now it's a positive y, even without completing it, is less than. Now, where on this graph is y less than, do you think? Above this line or below this line? Y values are less. That's what it says. A positive y is less. And the answer is underneath. So you would shade in area A here. Now, if you're doing this as a practice, what you should be doing, of course, is pausing it before I give the answers and seeing what you could figure out. But here, we're just trying to find the hypotenuse. So it's going to be a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And to find what c is, c, take the square root of both sides, equals the square root of a squared plus b squared. So it'll be the square root of 17 squared plus 18 squared. Do this first, then take the square root of this total, and that will give you what c is. And they want to round to 3 decimal places. So I'll pause and do the calculation. So at this stage, we get the square root of 613, and then we get approximately 24.7588. They want us to round to 3 decimal places. So we look at our 4th place. This is an 8. So we're going to drop the 8 and make this a 9. And that's our answer. Now, as you take these tests, I think I've told you that generally, for some reason, there's easier ones toward the end. Here we're on number 17, and this is a rather easy item. We just want to solve this equation for the letter t. Well, what I would do is I'd take my negative 6t over to this side and make it a positive 6t. Take this over to this side, and this becomes a negative 1 and a positive 6. 7 is 6. Then divide both sides by 6, and I get t equals 1. I don't know what this is, just the cursor that's in there when I did this. Okay, so an easy one. If you're finding you're spending too much time on one question, go to the next question. Then if you have time toward the end, you want to get as many points as you can. Because number 18 is just determine whether or not this 40 is a perfect square. No. That's 8 times 5, and if it was 8 times 8 or 5 times 5, so let's see, 6 squared is 36, 7 squared is 49, so this would be a no here. Alright, let's go up to the next one here. Alright, we're doing a little factoring for number 19. They want us to factor this by grouping. One of the skills we worked on in chapter 7. So in grouping, we kind of divide it into 2 groups and say, what can we take out of here? Well, I can see a common A, and we get R plus U. And then here, I can take out a common Z, and I get R plus U. So now I have this times this and this times this, but I could put these 2 in a parenthesis, A plus Z, and then time this common factor, R plus U. And often the book puts this second, puts this first. I like it this way, because we had said a long time ago that if we want to multiply this binomial, we can take this a and multiply it by this, and this z and multiply it by this, and that's what we have here. And this would be the answer once we did the multiplication horizontally. Okay, try this one on your own. Take a moment, pause it, copy it, do the substitution, and see what you get for an answer. So perhaps something like this. And we see this will be a negative 3 and 24, so this becomes a 21 here. Negative 3 plus 24 is a positive 21. And this is going to be a negative 14. Now, can you simplify this? This is the key, and the answer is yes. You could take a 7 out of each of these terms. So we know the answer is going to be negative. And 7 goes into 14 twice. 7 goes into 21 3 times. So our answer then is a negative 3/2. And hopefully that's what you got. All right, let's go on. We're almost finished. All right, looking at this one now. These are systems of equations. And we will solve these equations by putting them into slope-intercept form. So take a moment now and solve these equations for the letter y, because that will, once you put them in there and get some points, we'll be able to graph these equations here. So when I solve this equation for the letter y, I just transpose the 4x on the left to the right where it became a negative 4x. This is now in slope-intercept. When I solve this one for y, I transpose the 8x to this side where it became a negative 8x. But to get the y by itself, I divided each term by 2. So now I get y equals negative 4x plus 12. And what is this showing us here? Well, that our slopes are the same. And once that goes here. So once we were to plot these, we find that we would have parallel lines, so there would be no solution. So let's bring it down a little bit and finish this up. So since they are parallel lines, we would just click inconsistent. And I don't know if they wanted us to graph them or not. Probably not. Okay. Here's our last question. I'm shooting for 40 minutes here. We're approaching that. So here, this is in standard form. And if we put a 0 here, if this is 0, that this equals 0, then it would be 0. So this is going to go through the origin here, and one of our points would be 0, 0. Then I solved it for y a little bit. I moved the y to this side. And here, if x is 3, that would be a negative 2 times 3 equals 3y. This is a negative 6 equals 3y. Divide both sides by 3. I get here y equals a negative 2. So there's my other point. 3, negative 2. So it's going through the origin, and another point is 3, negative 2, which is right there. And that would then form a line, and you'd have this one completed. All right, well, this wraps us up, and we're just about 40 minutes. Again, I could have probably did it faster by not having to explain everything, but the purpose of this was to explain it step by step. So good luck. And of course you are allowed to watch this again.